Hi, and welcome. We're doing Chapter 8, Homework 3. Make sure to put your name and date. Okay, so let's take a look. It says write a 2-column proof. So that's why it has 2 columns. And then it says we always start with our given, right? So this is the first thing given. And then there's a second item given. So sometimes they put those together, sometimes they split them up. So it looks like I'm going to split those up. So I'm going to start there. CX is perpendicular to AB. Now I want to make marks, necklaces, carrots, add this information on here. So it says CX, this line is perpendicular to that line. So what does that mean? Well, when we see that symbol, we look at our notes. So when we see that symbol, we need 2 steps. First, we need to define the symbol. So the definition of, and that's the symbol for perpendicular. And if you don't have enough room, you can write that symbol, perpendicular. So the definition of perpendicular lines, and the item that goes on this side, when I look at my notes, is the two right angles. I want to say that they're the right angles, and I have to name them. So if this line is perpendicular to this line, then these would be the 2 right angles, okay? And so now we just have to name those. So this angle I could name CXA, and this angle CXB, and then again, using my notes, I simply say the 2 angles, here they were easy, there wasn't multiple stuff going on, but here, angle S and angle A are right angles. So this angle, CXA, and this angle, CXB, are right angles. Now our notes say, then go ahead and take the same 2 angles and put them congruent to each other because all right angles are congruent. So go ahead and restate these 2 angles. CXA is congruent to CXB because all right angles are congruent. All right angles are congruent. And again, you can use the symbol or write out the word. Doesn't matter to me. As long as you know what the symbol means, you can abbreviate. Now we have another given statement, CA. So line CA is congruent to line CB because that information was given. So we want to go up and take that information and put it in the picture. So CA is congruent to CB. That's line segment information. Now, what would be reflexive in this problem? So looking here in my notes, we added, after these conclusions, we might have vertical angles. So I don't see vertical angles there. This would be what vertical angles look like. Do I see a shared side or a shared angle? And if I do, you should have written in here, reflexive property. So shared sides and shared angles, the reason for that is called reflexive property. Okay, so now let's look back over here. Is there a side or an angle that's shared? So it looks like this side, CX, is shared between both triangles, CX. So I'm going to write that there. CX is congruent to CX. Reflexive. Now last, they said the triangle on the left is equal to the triangle on the right. And that's called a triangle congruent statement. So which of the triangle congruent statements? And so then we some of us know what those are, but some of us might need to look in our notes, the triangle congruence theorems. So if we look in here, I'm looking for what really does my evidence spell? When I look at my marks and necklaces, what's the order of the evidence? Okay, I'm looking for any of these 5. So when I go back over here, it says the hypotenuse matches the hypotenuse. And that's called a hypotenuse because I got 2 right angles. And I know it looks like one of the legs, CX is one of the legs of this triangle, and CX is one of the legs of that. So I'm going to call that HL, and that's technically a right triangle congruence theorem. So I can add in the word right to be a little bit more accurate. And then we notice what comes next. Well, after a triangle congruent statement, we usually have listing of the parts. We also know that when they list this prove, that always goes down here, but I can't write the word prove there. But this kind of gets copied and pasted down there as well. So I know that goes there. AX is congruent to BX, and that's what we started. That's the whole point of why we set this up. And I'm thinking it's C peak CTC. The corresponding parts of these congruent triangles are congruent. I can double check. See, last, middle. Yep, corresponding parts are congruent. Now, if we look back in our notes, notice, oh, I get it. After a congruent statement, we can list any of the 6 parts. Okay, and that's exactly what we did. We listed one of the congruent parts, and those are called corresponding parts of congruent triangles. Next question. Okay, so this is question 2. We'll speed this up a little bit. It says ZW is the perpendicular. Ooh, that's a little different than we had in class. So perpendicular bisector of XY. So not only is this cutting a segment, that's a segment, in half, it's actually cutting it in half at a 90-degree angle. Cool. So given, well, the given statement is, just copy and paste that here. That segment, this segment, ZW, is the perpendicular bisector of XY. So we just copy that in. Now, because we saw that symbol, we got to talk about it. The definition of perpendicular. So back in our notes, when we see that symbol, we know we got 2 steps to call out. We got to name the 2 right angles, and then we set them equal to each other. So we're going to name the 2 right angles, and we got a shortcut here. We can name that angle 8 and angle 7. So instead of using the 3 letters, we can use a number. And we know that the definition of perpendicular means that they're right angles. That's what perpendicular means. And then just like our notes, we're going to set those congruent to each other. Angle 8 is congruent to angle 7. So that's exactly what my notes said. Name the 2 angles, S and A, and say that they're right angles, because that's the definition, and then set them congruent to each other, because all right angles are congruent to each other. Okay. I'm getting the hang of this. Now they said the word bisector, so I have to talk about that. Now, they talked about this being the bisector, and bisector means that that line segment had to get cut in half. And now it's kind of hard to put this because my box is taking up space, but this segment YW has to be congruent to XW. So YW has to be congruent to XW because they said that this thing got cut in half. So that thing got cut in half. That's what bisector means. That's the definition of bisector. How did I know that? Well, again, I look at my notes. It says if something cuts something in half, bisect. Notice that's what we added these 2 marks, and we set those 2 segments equal to each other. Now reflexive. We're looking in the problem, and hopefully you're saying, is this missing a side or an angle? And we notice, or excuse me, sharing a side or an angle. It looks like they're sharing side ZW. So ZW has to be congruent to ZW. Okay, now they gave a congruent statement. So I'm back to this notes. Right? If I have to make a triangle congruence statement, I need to know what the evidence spells. And here's my choices. So here we go. It looks like it's spelling side, angle, side, side, angle, side. So I'm going to put side, angle, side, triangle congruence. Now, another correct answer would be leg, leg, right triangle congruence. Okay, so that's just another right answer that could have gone there. All right, next, we know from our notes, once we know something is congruent, I can pick any of the 6 parts and list them out as congruent parts. So let's see what they're trying to get to though, because we know the last step is, we went to all this trouble to prove that ZW bisects angle XZY. So if ZX bisects this angle, then I better be able to say that angle 6 is equal to angle 5. And I think I can say that, right? Because those are angles happening at Z, and notice angle Z is at the same place in the ordering. So that is a corresponding part. Awesome. Now last but not least, we see this word bisect, so that must mean we have to talk about, well, that would be the definition of bisector. If we know these are equal, that's what bisect means. And we're talking about angles, so. Okay. Thanks for joining us. Check out the next video for the next 3 questions.